start with our 3 7-line prayer.
So we'll start with the prayer that's just inside this first prayer inside here. We do this 3 times.
Orgen yugi num jansam, pemage sardompola, yatsen chogi nodrupne, pemajone jesurak, Gordukan dro mangpogor, Yetki jesu druki, Jinji lop jir shek su so, Guru pema siddhi om. Organ yogi num jansam, pemage sardompola, yatsen chogi nodrupne, pemajone jesurak, Gordukan dro mangpogor, Yetki jesu druki, Jinji lop jir shek su so, Guru pema siddhi om. Organ yogi num jansam, pemage sardompola, yatsen chogi nodrupne, pemajone jesurak, Gordukan dro mangpogor, Yetki jesu druki, Jinji lop jir shek su so, Guru pema siddhi om.
Om ahum benza guru
Guru
pema
pema
siddhi.
siddhi om. All right, so welcome everyone. As Jane mentioned, this is a 6-week series on the practice of Tonglen, also known as the practice of sending and receiving, or the practice of exchanging self and others. And this practice opens our heart to the suffering of others and to the ability to face our own suffering, diminishes our self-cherishing, it deepens our compassion and loving kindness, and helps us to develop bodhicitta, which is the awakened mind committed to benefiting all beings, and that is essential on this path. So each week we're going to try a different Tonglen visualization. Some parts will be the same week to week, and some parts will be different. So there'll be some slight variations each week. But before we meditate, I want to talk a little bit about the law of karma, or cause and effect. In the last class, I said that karma is not shame-based, it's science. And by that, I mean, when I say it's not shame-based, I mean that there's not a single form a being could take or a choice that they could make that would make them undeserving of our love. There's nothing they could do that would make them undeserving of our love. And I want to continue that thought and dig a little deeper into how karma works. It's not a judgment received from on high. There's no external deity that's there to praise you or to smite you for your choices. No one to reward you, no one to please, no one to argue with or barter with or negotiate with. Karma is an observation-based science, like the law of gravity. And we're all subject to the law of karma, just as we are all subject to the law of gravity. In our relative world, which means the world that we experience, our physical, tangible world, everything that we experience arises and occurs based on the natural law of karma, or cause and effect. Every single thing you experience is because of karma, whether there's a cool breeze, or you catch a cold, or you step and poop on the sidewalk. Every single thing is karma. And karma simply means action, which includes both the cause and the effect. They're one thing. So that action, that karma can be both, it can be positive, it could be negative, or it can be somewhere in between. And it could be mixed karma. And there's 4 things to remember regarding the karmic law of cause and result. This is kind of the basics. A karmic result is certain. So all of the teachings of the Buddha say that every action, no matter how small it is, has a result. The result of an action tends to increase. We talked about this last week, that our karmic accounts compound interest. So whatever karma we have, over time, it grows. So if you experience instant karma, hello. If you experience instant karma, which is kind of rare, then maybe you accidentally steal someone's pen, and then later that day someone else accidentally steals it from you. Boom, done, right? That was like 1-to-1 because it was instant. There was no time for it to accrue interest. If you don't pay off your credit card bill at the end of the month, what happens? It accrues interest, it gets bigger. So the longer it takes you to pay off that karma, to experience the result of it, or counteract it with a positive antidote, the longer that it sits there in your account, so to speak, in your mind stream, it grows and it gets bigger. And so the result you experience will be worse or larger than what you initially did. The third thing is you'll never experience anything that's not the result of an action of your own in the past. So every single thing that you experience is also, it's your own doing. It's somehow your own doing. Even though sometimes it seems like, it would feel better for us to blame others for our experiences, at the end of the day, it comes back to the seeds that we have sown ourselves. And fourth thing, the karmic seeds sown by your actions are never wasted and they never disappear on their own. There's no such thing as even a single act that disappears, just vanishes into thin air. The imprint created by a negative action, like killing or stealing, will never disappear from your mind stream until you either experience its inevitable result or counteract it with a positive antidote. So how do we know which actions are positive and which are negative? The Buddha has taught that our intention is really the deciding factor for whether an action is positive or negative. And the same action, like 2 different people could do the same thing for different reasons, and one could be positive and one could be negative. So, and a truly altruistic intention is based on the understanding that all beings are seeking happiness and seeking freedom from pain. When we intentionally hurt those who are seeking happiness or harm them in any way, especially if we have a self-serving motivation, then that is a negative act. So all sentient beings want to be happy and they want to be free from suffering just like we do. So when we cause them pain, that is naturally an unjust act. And unjust deeds always come back to bite us in the butt, and they bring really unpleasant consequences. When we respect this knowledge and abide by the law of karma, it's similar to respecting the laws of physics. It's not about listening to someone, like just, I've got to follow these rules that were handed to me by someone, and I don't know why, but that's the rule. Instead, this is more like obeying the laws of physics. Like we don't have a choice about obeying the laws of physics. The laws of physics are our reality. That's how the world works. But when you respect them, that helps keep you alive, keep you safe. So for instance, if you respect the law of gravity, then you're very careful when you're looking over the edge of the Grand Canyon, right? Or does anyone know what Newton's first law of motion is? Anyone know? No.
There's a motion until they hit
Yes.
something that hits them.
Yes. So most of you don't know the name off the top of your head, but Newton's first law of motion is an object at rest remains at rest, and an object in motion remains in motion at constant speed and in a straight line until it's acted, unless acted on by an unbalanced force. So off the top of your head, you don't know that that's what that law is, but you respect it every day when you put on your seatbelt and when you buckle your kids into their car seats, that you are respecting Newton's first law of motion. You understand that if the car hits something, you're flying through the windshield unless you have a seatbelt to stop you. So we don't have to be scientists and understand all the math that goes with that, but we can follow it. We can understand that that is in our best interest to understand that rule and put on our seatbelts. So understanding these rules that govern our world and abiding by them sensibly ensures our well-being. So karma is the same way. And the Buddha did not invent karma. The Buddha didn't invent this idea of karma. And he didn't decide what was virtuous or non-virtuous. He didn't just have some opinions about that. He observed how the phenomenal world works. So just in the same ways these laws of physics were learned by observation, that's how these karmic rules were discovered as well. The Buddha discovered how cause and effect functions. So the Buddha didn't say this is positive and this is negative because I say so. Instead, he made 4 observations that serve as criteria for determining what is positive and what is negative. And these are really useful to contemplate and to observe for yourselves. And if you have questions about, I wonder what the karma of this is or that is, this is some criteria that you can use to just figure that out for yourself. Most of this is stuff that we can observe in our own experience, although the Buddha has, in his wisdom, he's able to see a little bit broader than us, but most of this I think we'd be able to check for ourselves, which the Buddha encourages us to do. So the first criteria that the Buddha observed for determining something as negative is that when we engage in negative acts and engaging negative acts and the root cause, the self-centered neuroses that drives us to these negative acts, those both create suffering. In our experience, they're painful. We're not joyful when we're engaging in negative acts and when we're experiencing self-centered neurosis. So, for instance, when we are just consumed with anger or rage, or you're obsessed with jealous thoughts and envy, or you're really desiring something and really attached to something that you really want something, or you're confused about what's going on, or you're just feeling really self-important and puffed up with yourself. Any of those feelings are not pleasurable. We're not happy when we're feeling that way. And we're not feeling peaceful. We're not feeling peaceful or pleasurable. So it's uncomfortable to be angry. It's uncomfortable to be full of greed. When you are wanting something that you don't have, you are not currently content, right? And the Buddha taught that any time that you want something to be other than it is, you're suffering. Because you're not content, you're not at peace. So these states of mind, or anger, greed, ignorance, all of that, they're called kleshas, or poisons. They poison our mind. They contaminate our mind and they consume us with this painful, overwhelming experience of that particular poison. So that's the first criteria for determining something as negative, is that we can experience in the moment when we are angry, we are suffering. So that's our first criteria, is that the neurosis that underlies our negative deeds makes us unhappy in and of itself, and then committing the negative deed also makes us unhappy. The second criteria is that this klesha activity, this neurosis, veils the truth. So all beings, one of the most basic universal truths is that all beings want to be happy and will work to secure their own happiness. And they want to be free from suffering and will work to secure the freedom from their own suffering. They'll try to avoid suffering. And we all do this 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. This is our full-time job, is finding happiness and avoiding suffering every single moment. Even when we're dreaming, even when we're sleeping and we're dreaming, even if our dreams, that's what we're doing. And then, but we're the same as every other being in that way. And then in the absolute truth, the true nature of the world, the true nature of reality, there is no duality. There's no intrinsic self. There's no intrinsic other. There is no separation between self and other. And in that absolute truth, experiencing that absolute truth is always experienced as peace and equilibrium. So when we're indulging in these negative states like anger and greed, and we're not feeling at peace, and we're not feeling in equilibrium, we are not experiencing the true nature of reality. It's veiling us from the truth. And in fact, when we're in those states, the truth is the furthest thing from our mind, and our delusion is all-consuming, and we go the other direction. Instead of understanding this emptiness and the inseparability of self and other, and the inseparability of even ourselves and the objects we want, whatever it is we're seeking, instead we are consumed by our delusion of anger or greed or ignorance, and we take the dualistic world to be very, very real. If you notice, when you have intense emotions, things feel very, very real. It feels concrete. It feels like you don't have space. You lose sense of that spaciousness that you might be able to notice when you're in a better state of mind, feeling more peace and equilibrium. And when we're angry, it's said that our experience is mostly made up of our own projections. So in the neurosis of anger, we lose touch with the universal truth of the relative world and the peace and equilibrium of that view of emptiness and ultimate and absolute truth. Because all that matters to us in that moment is making our case, proving our point, getting back at our enemy, winning our argument. That becomes our priority. And then as we continue to engage in that, as we continue to engage in self-absorption and continuing to follow the habit of those poisons, we solidify ourselves further in our self-absorption and in that kind of self-justifying logic. And as we do that, we move further and further away from the truth, both relative truth and absolute truth. We move further and further away from it. We forget about karma, the relative truth of karma. We forget about the absolute truth of emptiness. We are just thinking about what I need in this moment and how I get it, and that's it. And so that's the second reason why the Buddha identified neurosis as negative. It veils the truth. The third criteria identifying neurosis as negative is that it increases its own kind. So when we're engaging in anger, if I give in to anger and I lash out, the next time it's easier for me to lash out. So if my kid's annoying me and I yell at him, the next time he's annoying me, it's easier to yell at him. Same thing with, succumbing to a craving. If you are craving cookies and you eat the cookies, the next time you're craving cookies, it's easier to go and eat the cookies, right? And the same thing goes for positive actions. If you don't want to eat cookies and you're like, no, I'm not going to eat the cookies. And then the next day it's easier because you've already did it one day and it's easier to build up on that and go like, I'm going to do it 2 days in a row, 3 days in a row. But our desirous state of mind increases the more we engage it. Our angry state of mind increases the more we engage it. Whatever those poisons are, the more we engage with them, they proliferate. They self-proliferate. And it said that, the nature of desire is that it's insatiable. It can never be fully satisfied. It can never be fully fulfilled. So giving into craving is like drinking salty water. You're never satisfied. You just keep drinking more and more and more of it. The more you drink, the thirstier you become. So, for instance, if you are, let's say you don't have very much money and you're fairly content with, cheap coffee and cheap beer and a cheap car and a cheap apartment, and you're pretty content with like your setup, but then your income increases and you upgrade your coffee, you upgrade your beer, and you upgrade, you get a nicer car with, power windows, and nowadays they don't even have those like roll down windows anymore. But you upgrade to a nicer car, you get a fancier place, and then, and you keep upgrading, right? It's kind of insatiable. You keep going. You get a nicer and nicer car. You get fancier and fancier coffee, and now you don't just want craft beer, you want like craft beer from the special place with some rescued animal petting zoo or something. Like you just like you've got to get some specialty niche thing. So, and nowadays they call this lifestyle creep. So as it creeps, and so then maybe you lose your job, or suddenly something changes and you go back to an income that previously you were content with. But now you can't afford the fancy craft beer. You can't afford your fancy coffee. You can't afford your nice, the payments on your car, and you've got to take the bus, and it feels, if you suffer from it then. You didn't suffer from it in the first place, but now, because you had a taste of something more and you had all this, you had all this nicer stuff, and then now it's a suffering to have the same experience that previously you were okay with. So there's this kind of constant need to improve our own situation, to have more and more pleasure, less and less suffering, to just there's always more to desire. And it creeps forward. Our expectations just creep and creep and creep, and we're never satisfied. And then as we practice that habit of attachment, we sow the seeds for further attachment in the future, continuing to be attached to more things in the future. We strengthen that habit of attachment. And while in a state of craving, when we're wanting something, we can't be content with what we have, because we can't have two states of mind can't coexist at the same time. We can't be content with what we have and also wanting the next best thing. And unfortunately, our culture really, really, really encourages us to always want the next best thing. So we don't have a lot of influences encouraging us to think differently about that, because our culture really encourages us to always have more. That this is like the point of life. As far as capitalism, this is like the point of life, is to just like buy as much as you can to make yourself as happy as possible, and screw everything else. Just make yourself happy. Spend money. Make people rich. That's it. And when we're in that state of mind, then we have no room to find contentment, or no room to find like a sense of ease inside ourselves, to just be content in the present moment, to just be okay with how things are. And you can see just how destructive that, looking at outside of our own consumption, just looking at the entire world and how this pattern plays out on a scale of 8 billion people doing this, you see how destructive that is. just there is no end to the desire. There's no end to what we'll try to drill and mine from the earth, or how we'll try to, the number of trees we could chop down, or the number of, fast fashion clothes we could make to wear for 5 minutes, to throw in the ocean, to go somewhere and land on someone's beaches and become trash. It's just, so we can buy more fast fashion. It just really, it self-proliferates. It just continues going and going and going and going and going. And that's the third criteria. The fourth criteria for determining something as negative is that engaging in a negative deed with an ill intent, whether this is just something in our mind, or whether it's our speech or physical actions, it sows a seed and creates an imprint deep inside our mind stream. And then when the right conditions arise, then that seed ripens in the future as suffering. And it ripens in your mind stream, or your physical body, or your environment. So Atira Zeoli says, just as a single mango seed grows and matures into a huge tree, producing thousands of fruits year after year for many, many years, the ripening and proliferating of negative seeds must likewise be endured. So, and we'll talk in a minute about how that ripening actually works. But so it's really useful to understand these 4 criteria, because the rules of karma are not arbitrary. They're not just some guy's opinion, or, these are the criteria. And we can consider them for ourselves. We can look at our own actions, and we can watch our own minds and go, wow, I'm really angry right now. Am I happy in this moment? And is engaging in this anger making me happy? Is anything that I do out of anger going to make me happy? And you can just notice that. And noticing that, and noticing the way that karma works in your own life is, it's a way that we can guide ourselves and learn how to, have our own karmic compass, knowing what to engage in and what not to engage in. And that is, and that's one of the key parts of the Bodhisattva path, is knowing what to accept and what to discard, what activities to engage in and what not to engage in. And it's good to analyze this for ourselves, because the Buddha said, examine my words like a goldsmith examines gold. Don't take my words as truth simply because they come from me. So the Buddha can see more. I think the 4th criteria is hard for us to see, because we can't see our future lives. We can't see that, I don't know, stealing this watch is gonna, cause me poverty in the future. I can't actually see my future life. So I have to trust the Buddha on that one. But I can see the first 3. I can see the first 3 very clearly, just in my own experience, my day-to-day life. So, and sometimes when we experience more instant karma, we can see the 4th one. The full ripening of a karmic act takes 4 steps. So in the case of killing, the first step involves identifying the object, the being that we want to kill. So if we think of one of my favorite movies, The Princess Bride. Has everyone seen The Princess Bride? Okay. So in The Princess Bride, we could say our object is the 6-fingered man. And then the second step is formulating the intention to kill. Hello, my name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my father. Prepare to die. That is formulating the intention. The third step is the murderous action, the sword fight. And then the 4th step is the consequence, the death of the 6-fingered man. So the process works the same way if the action is virtuous. So first we identify the object, the being we wish to benefit, like say a child who's hungry. and then we formulate our intention that we want to feed the child, and then the third step is buying the food and giving it to them, and then the fourth is the result. The child's no longer hungry. So what happens if not all 4 steps happen, though? If you identify an enemy and you have the intention to kill him, and so let's say if you turn off the Princess Bride early, before Inigo Montoya for this final scene of the sword fight, perhaps. So if you have the intention to kill him and you try to kill him but fail, 3 of the 4 steps are involved. Like, so you don't have the final step of the person dying. Or if you accidentally step on a bug, you skip the first 2 steps. You didn't identify the bug, you didn't single it out, you didn't have any intention to kill the bug, but you did do the action of squashing it and it did die. So the repercussions in those cases are much less severe than the repercussions of an action that involves all 4 steps. And any act that involves all 4 steps produces a fully ripened result. The fruit fully ripens. So for example, in the case of murder motivated by anger or desire, that fully ripened result would be rebirth in a hell realm. And then after that result comes experiences similar to the cause, in which the murderer spends 500 lifetimes as a human with a very short lifespan. And in each of those 500 lifetimes, he's killed in a way similar to the way in which he murdered previously. And then after that comes the experience of action similar to the cause, in which the momentum of the murderer's karma manifests as a behavioral pattern similar to those in his past lives. So as a child, he might bully and abuse others or torture small animals, or otherwise act in just, hateful, aggressive ways. And lastly, there's the conditioning result. The murderer is reborn in an environment like a place with extremely harsh conditions that reflects the mental poison, the anger or desire that motivated that initial harmful action. So, and you can imagine that's kind of focusing on just the act of like murder. If you think of all of the negative acts and all of the ways that we harm people, and stealing and greed and envy, and just the way that we engage in all of these poisons, and they self-proliferate, and the amount of seeds that we're sowing every single day for how many countless lifetimes, we have just this incredible karmic collage inside of us of all of these seeds ripening. And that creates this very unique and detailed experience that we have in our life. All of this, I lost my pen today, I stepped in poop on the sidewalk, I lost my job, I got a new job, whatever. All of that mixed bag that we experience is all from this karma that we've created over lifetimes. So you don't have to know what you've done to experience its effects. So, we don't remember necessarily what we were doing when we were like 18 months old. But, like if you were squashing bugs or something when you were a little baby, it doesn't matter that you don't remember it. You still did it. So, and we sow seeds all the time without knowing what effect they'll produce. So whether you do or don't know what you did was wrong, you still experience the effects of your actions. And this karma usually ripens over the course of many lifetimes. And because most of us can't recall our past lives, it's difficult for us to connect those dots and see, oh, I'm experiencing this because I did that. However, Padmasambhava, who I'll say my son says is the coolest Buddha, just for information, he's the coolest. Padmasambhava there. If Padmasambhava says, if you want to know your past life, look at your present condition. If you want to know your future lives, look at your present actions. And the Dalai Lama also said, if you wonder what you were doing in your past, look at your body. And if you want to know what will happen to you in the future, look at your mind. There was a great Lama in Tibet who was in ill health for more than 20 years. And through his meditative ability, he could remember a past life in which he had killed a musk deer for its glands, which are used to make incense. And he knew that his ill health was the result of killing that musk deer. But most of us don't have a clue how we created the experiences that we're having now. In order for karma to ripen, there must be both cause and conditions. The cause is the action, the karmic seed we've planted, and the conditions are like the soil and the sun and the water that help that seed to grow and determine whether, when the seed sprouts, whether and when that ripening will take place in one lifetime or another. And Jagdatuku says, any seed that we've planted will lie dormant until the circumstances are right. The karma we've accumulated over lifetimes is like a mountain of seeds waiting for the right conditions to grow. So everything that we experience in our lives, every joy, every sorrow, everything sprouts from the karmic seeds we planted in the past, which have now been provided the right conditions to grow. However, we still have the ability to determine our future experience. So it's not like everything is predetermined. We've put all these seeds in the ground and that's just it. We're done. Just give up now. We're just going to suffer from here on out. It's not hopeless like that. So so for one thing, the karma is there until we either experience it or we counteract it with a positive antidote. So there are ways to purify karma and counteract the negative karma that we've accrued, so that we don't have to experience it. And when karma arises in our life, when our karma does ripen, we react to it and we make more karma, which will affect our future. So when our karma arises, we can choose our response. And depending on how we respond, that karma that we're creating now will be either positive or negative. So, or mixed. So the only way that we can break this perpetual cycle of action-reaction is to bring awareness to understanding how this law of karma works, bringing awareness to our mind, our intention, to our speech and our actions that we're engaging in, being mindful of those things, and making different choices. Choosing wisely. Putting our seatbelt on, our karmic seatbelt. Understand the way the world works and wear a seatbelt. So, and as I said earlier, our intention is the deciding factor for whether an action is positive or negative. So a great place to start is by cultivating a truly altruistic intention, a bodhicitta intention, which is based on the understanding that all beings long for happiness and long for freedom from suffering, which is what we will be meditating on today. So, I think it's important to understand also, I harped on this in the last class, but I think it's really important to understand the non-judgmental aspect of karma, because a lot of times we use our judgment to distance ourselves from other people's pain. And we think that instead of caring for this person, I could escape this suffering. Like, I don't want to have the experience this person is having. And I can escape that by distancing myself through judgment, like instead of loving them, we judge them. Oh, you did that. Oh, you brought that on yourself. Like, oh, I'm not doing that. I'm not making those choices. Like, I'm not going to have that experience. We want to just kind of believe that we can insulate ourselves from it by not facing it, by not facing the suffering of others. It's like a denial that we engage in. And this like hard-heartedness. And yeah, I think just our culture has a real habit of looking down on people for their suffering, looking down on people who are poor or homeless, or, you know, distancing ourselves from people who are experiencing physical handicaps. We find ways to distance ourselves and our hearts from them. And it's really important that we don't do that. It's really important that we understand that we are the same as all beings, and we're all creating the same causes of anger and greed and ignorance and greed and envy. We've all been laying the same seeds. And it's just like each of us kind of like pulled the little lottery wheel, and, you know, you're pulling up these seeds this time, and you're pulling up these seeds this time, and you're pulling up these seeds this time. But we all have the same seeds. We've all killed people. We've all stolen. We've all been jerks and done, you know, and like, you know, been real jerks when we break up with people, or we've like, you know, sabotaged, you know, maybe you like sabotage someone in a subtle way, or like there's all sorts of subterfuge we've engaged in, or lies we've told, or, you know, like none of us are innocent. We've all done the same things. And so it's just, you know, this person's experiencing the result of their greed in this lifetime, and this person's experiencing the result of their anger in this lifetime. And there's no reason to judge anyone as like, well, you did worse than me. I'm not as bad. I didn't do these things you did. You probably did. Like, you know, you probably did. And if we consider the equality of all life, you know, we think of someone like Hitler as being the absolute, the worst example, right? Like this is someone who's like the worst of the worst. Or, you know, King Leopold, I think, was potentially even worse than that, you know. And there are these particular people that we single out as being the worst of the worst, because human suffering is special to us, and it's something that we track in our history, and we write it down, and we retain cultural memory of it. We don't think about all of the, you know, all of the animals that have gone extinct, and the forests that have been raised, and the, you know, people that have, you know, there are people that do science experiments pouring this like molten metal into like ant hills, and to like to figure out the structure of an ant colony, and they pour like molten metal into it, and then they like dig it out, and you see the sculpture of like what the ant colony did. Like, so they killed every single ant in that ant colony. How many thousands and thousands of ants died for their little science experiment? And, you know, so we're not any better than the worst of the worst of the worst. We don't know what karma we have, and we don't know when it'll get pulled out, but we shouldn't think that we're any better than anyone else. We're just lucky in this moment that we have the opportunity to practice the Dharma, and that we have the opportunity to learn to be mindful of our actions, and to learn how to make different choices. And so many beings don't have that. They don't have that opportunity right now. They haven't created the causes for that opportunity. So that's the one thing that sets us apart, is that we have the opportunity to help them, to help ourselves, and to help others. And that's the only thing that really sets us apart. And that's something we should just be grateful for and take advantage of. So these meditation instructions are from The Heart of Compassion, which is a commentary by Dogo Khyentse Rinpoche on the 37 verses on the practice of a bodhisattva, which is a poem composed in the 14th century by Gyaltse Ngolchu Togme. And this poem is itself considered a distillation of a key Mahayana text, the Bodhicharyavatara, or the Way of the Bodhisattva by Shantideva. Both of these texts, the 37 verses on the practice of a bodhisattva and the Way of the Bodhisattva, they contain the entire path. They are extraordinary books, extraordinary texts. And in this commentary, Dogo Khyentse gives some pith instructions on how to make the practice of Tonglen more potent, more effective. So Tonglen is a practice that can be done very simply. It's simply the practice of a meditation practice in which we exchange our own happiness with the suffering of others. So we take on the sufferings of others and we give them our happiness. And in his pith instructions, he has a very detailed bodhicitta visualization that we'll be starting with. And so kind of spending more time developing bodhicitta at the beginning is a way to make this practice more potent. So often when we, so bodhicitta is the awakened mind that's committed to ending suffering for all beings and bringing them to enlightenment. And often before a teaching or before a practice, we just say, generate bodhicitta, and you're just supposed to just conjure it up. And so at some point you have to kind of practice conjuring that. And because we're not in the habit of remembering bodhicitta. So in his pith instructions, he has us spend a long time building up our bodhicitta and really stoking that fire. And that makes this practice very, very potent. So you can also do this practice faster with kind of like conjure, generate bodhicitta and then engage in the Tonglen practice. But so we're going to do this a little bit longer way. So first we'll get in meditation position, whatever meditation position you're comfortable in. I'm going to be sitting in a chair or on the floor. And what's most important when we meditate is to have a straight back and a relaxed body. We start by arousing a deeply felt warmth, sensitivity, and compassion for all beings. To do so, begin by thinking about someone who's been very kind and loving to you. Typically, the example given is your mother. You could think of your own mother. But it could be anyone who's been kind and loving to you. And remember and reflect on their kindness. If it's your mother that you're thinking of, you could think of how she gave you life, how she suffered the discomforts of pregnancy and on childbirth, how she looked after you as you grew up and made sure you had clean clothes and food to eat and kept you safe and stayed up with you when you were sick. She was ready to make any sacrifice for you and to put your welfare before her own. So just consider that. When you feel strong love and compassion, imagine step by step this person is undergoing the sufferings of the six realms. In the hell realm, they are repeatedly and brutally killed and revived. They're tossed into a boiling cauldron of molten bronze. They suffer in agony before your very eyes. And then imagine that they've been reborn as a hungry ghost, just skin and bones. They haven't even caught sight of food for 12 years. And they stretch out their hands to you, imploring you, "My child, do you have anything you can give me to eat?" And then imagine them reborn as an animal, a terrified doe being chased by hunters and their dogs. In a panic, they leap off a high cliff to escape them, but they fall and shatter all their bones. Still alive, in unbearable pain, unable to move, they're finished off by the hunter's knives. Continue to imagine this person who has been so kind and loving to you, undergoing in quick succession situation after situation of suffering. And if you're unfamiliar with the sufferings of all of the six realms, I think there's enough suffering in the human and animal realms for you to focus on. As you imagine this, an intense feeling of compassion will irresistibly well up in your mind. At that moment, turn that intense compassion to all beings, realizing that each one of them must surely have been your mother many times and deserves the same love and compassion as your mother of this present life. It's important to include all of those whom you now consider enemies or troublemakers. Reflect deeply about everything that all these beings are going through as they wander endlessly in samsara's vicious cycle of suffering. Think about old, infirm people unable to care for themselves. Think about all of those who are sick and in pain, people who are desperate and impoverished, lacking even the most basic necessities. Think about people suffering famine and starvation, the pangs of hunger, an unquenchable thirst. Think of those who are physically blind or physically handicapped. And think about those who are spiritually destitute, starved of the nourishment of Dharma, and blind to any authentic vision of truth. Think about all those who suffer as slaves to their own minds, constantly maddened by desire and aggression, and about those who harm one another without respite. And visualize all these sentient beings as a crowd in front of you, and let all the different forms that their suffering takes arise vividly in your mind. And with an intense feeling of compassion, begin the practice of sending and receiving. We start by focusing on your most hated enemy, someone who has caused much trouble and difficulty for you. So take a minute to bring that person to mind. Consider that as your breath goes out, all of your happiness, all of your vitality, merit, good fortune, health, and enjoyment is carried out to your enemy on your breath in the form of cool, soothing, luminous white nectar. And make the following prayer. May this truly go to my enemy and be entirely given to him. Visualize that he absorbs this white nectar, which provides him with everything that he needs. If his life was to be short, imagine that now it's prolonged. If he needs money, imagine that now he's wealthy. If he's sick, now he's cured. If he's unhappy, now imagine him so full of joy that he feels like singing and dancing. As you breathe in, consider that you take into yourself, in the form of a dark mass, all of the sickness, obscurations, and mental poisons your enemy may have had, and that he's thereby completely relieved of all his afflictions. Think that his sufferings come to you as easily as mountain mist wafted away by the wind. As you take his suffering into you, you feel great joy and bliss mingled with the experience of emptiness. And now do the same for the infinity of beings you are visualizing before you. Send them all of your happiness and take on their suffering. Now visualize that your heart is a brilliant ball of light. As you breathe out, it radiates rays of white light in all directions, carrying your happiness to all beings. And as you breathe in, their suffering, negativity, and afflictions come toward you in the form of dense black light, which is absorbed into your heart and disappears into its brilliant white light without a trace, relieving all beings of their pain and sorrow. So that is one variation on the Tonglen practice. You can use this practice at any time, in all circumstances, anywhere you are. You can be on your meditation cushion, or you can be on the bus, or in a waiting room, or wherever. And you can do this. You can do this anytime. And by constantly practicing this exchange of self and others until it becomes second nature to us, until, you can be walking down the street doing this. Just every person that passes you by, you're just suffering in, happiness out. You could just do this for everyone you meet at any time. And we practice this over and over again until it becomes second nature to us. And then it will reach the very core of the practice of compassion and the bodhicitta, which is the key to enlightenment for ourselves and others. So that's the class. Then I guess, and then we do the Chenrezig practice, which also is a practice of compassion. And if you're not familiar with this practice, Chenrezig here is the Buddha of compassion. And all of those many, many arms are there to help all sentient beings in all their bajillion forms. So he's got so many arms and so many eyes so that he can help all beings. And during this part where it says visualization and praise, we imagine him in front of us. So you can see the picture up from there. You just visualize him in front of you while we do this practice.
So we'll begin with the 7-line prayer. We'll do one time.
Organ yogi nubjansam Pemage sardompola Yatsen chogi ngodrupne Pemajone jesudrak Ordukandro mangpokor Yetki jesudak drupki Jinji lop cheer sheksu sol Guru Pema Siddhi Om Om Penza Guru Pema Siddhi Om.
Continue in English.
Your thousand arms are the thousand universal monarchs. Your thousand eyes, the thousand Buddhas of this fortunate age. You who teach each and every one of us according to our needs. Lord Avalokiteshvara, to you I pay homage.
And the mantra is Om Mani Padme Hum Kri. We'll recite that for a little bit.
Om Mani Padme Hum Kri. Om Mani Padme Hum Kri. Om Mani Padme Hum Kri.
Om Mani Padme Hum Kri.
Om Mani Padme Hum Kri. Om Mani Padme Hum Kri. Om Mani Padme Hum Kri. Om Mani Padme Hum Kri. Om Mani Padme Hum Kri. Om Mani Padme Hum Kri. Om Mani Padme Hum Kri. Om Mani Padme Hum Kri. Om Mani Padme Hum Kri. Om Mani Padme Hum Kri. Om Mani Padme Hum Kri. Om Mani Padme Hum Kri. Om Mani Padme Hum Kri. Om Mani Padme Hum Kri. Om Mani Padme Hum Kri. Om Mani Padme Hum Kri. Om Mani Padme Hum Kri. Om Mani Padme Hum Kri. Om Mani Padme Hum Kri. Om Mani Padme Hum Kri. Om Mani Padme Hum Kri. Om Mani Padme Hum Kri. Om Mani Padme Hum Kri. Om Mani Padme Hum Kri. Om Mani Padme Hum Kri. Om Mani Padme Hum Kri. Om Mani Padme Hum Kri
Dedication on the back page.
By this virtue, may I swiftly accomplish the state of Chenrezig, and may all sentient beings without exception be placed in that very state. By this effort, may all sentient beings be free of suffering. May their minds be filled with the nectar of virtue. In this way, may all causes resulting in suffering be extinguished, and only the light of compassion shine throughout all realms.
You're welcome to take this home if you'd like.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for being here.